The desperate pounding of her fists against the cellar door had worn Olivia Dawson's knuckles raw, but she refused to surrender to despair. The darkness of the cellar pressed in around her like a shroud, the damp air filling her lungs with each ragged breath as she called out again, praying that someone, anyone, might hear her cries for help. New Mexico Territory, 1872. Olivia had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to Las Cruces in the New Mexico Territory with dreams of a new life, responding to an advertisement for a mail-order bride placed by a man named Harold Jenkins. The advertisement had described him as a successful businessman seeking a refined Eastern lady to share his prosperous life in the growing frontier town. Her circumstances in Boston, the death of her parents, mounting debts, and few prospects for a woman alone, had made the offer seem like providence. The stagecoach journey had been grueling. Endless days of bouncing over rutted trails, nights in roadhouses of questionable repute, and the constant anxiety of what awaited her at the journey's end. But Olivia had persevered, clutching the daguerreotype of Harold Jenkins, a distinguished-looking gentleman with a neatly trimmed beard, and his flowery letters describing the comfort and security that would be hers in Las Cruces. The reality had been far different. Harold Jenkins was 20 years older than his photograph suggested, with yellowed teeth and breath that reeked of whiskey. His prosperous business was a dilapidated general store on the edge of town that seemed to stock more dust than merchandise. And the comfortable home was a shabby two-story house badly in need of repair, with peeling paint and broken shutters. But it was not Jenkins' deception about his circumstances that had led to Olivia's current predicament. It was her discovery, on her second day in Las Cruces, of ledgers hidden in his desk drawer, ledgers that detailed shipments of stolen goods, bribes paid to local officials, and what appeared to be a counterfeiting operation. When Jenkins caught her examining the ledgers, his face had contorted with rage. "You nosy little bitch," he had snarled, grabbing her by the hair. "I paid good money to bring you out here, and this is how you repay me." His fist had connected with her jaw before she could respond, and when she regained consciousness, she found herself in this cellar, dank, dark, and apparently forgotten by everyone except Jenkins, who appeared once a day to slide a plate of scraps and a cup of water through a small opening at the bottom of the door. That had been 3 days ago. Or was it 4? Time blended in the darkness, marked only by the thin sliver of light that crept beneath the door during daylight hours. Today, Jenkins had not appeared with her usual meager rations. The gnawing in her stomach had become a constant companion, but it was not hunger that drove her to pound on the door and scream until her voice grew hoarse. It was the sound of Jenkins upstairs, talking with someone, making plans to get rid of the problem, as he had put it. "Help. Please, someone help me," Olivia cried, her voice breaking with desperation. "I'm locked in the cellar. Help!" Her throat felt like sandpaper, her voice barely carrying beyond the thick wooden door. Tears of frustration streamed down her dirty cheeks as she slumped against the wall, wondering if she would ever see daylight again. Outside the Jenkins property, Caleb Irwin rode slowly down the dusty street on his dappled gray stallion, Thundercloud. At 32, Caleb had seen his share of troubles, having fought in the war between the states and then drifted westward, working as a ranch hand before eventually saving enough to purchase his own modest spread outside Las Cruces. The drought had brought him into town to discuss water rights with some of the other local ranchers. The meeting had been contentious, with tempers flaring under the relentless New Mexico sun. Now, heading back toward his ranch, Caleb's thoughts were occupied with concerns about his cattle and whether they would survive if the dry spell continued much longer. He wouldn't ordinarily have taken this route through the less reputable outskirts of town, but a broken wagon had blocked the main street, forcing him to detour. As he passed the run down Jenkins' property, something caught his attention, a faint sound, almost like a cry. Caleb reined in thundercloud, sitting motionless in the saddle as he listened. For a moment, there was nothing but the whisper of the hot breeze through the cottonwood trees. Then he heard it again, a woman's voice, thin with desperation. "Hello," he called out, swinging down from his saddle. "Is someone there?" The cry came again, slightly louder this time, seeming to emanate from the side of the house. Caleb tied Thundercloud to a fence post and approached cautiously. He had never much cared for Harold Jenkins. The man had a reputation for sharp dealing and questionable business practices. But Caleb had never heard of him keeping someone prisoner. As he rounded the corner of the house, the cries became clearer. "Help! Please, I'm locked in the cellar." Caleb spotted the cellar doors, half hidden by overgrown weeds with a heavy padlock securing them. He knelt down, putting his ear close to the crack between the doors. "Madam, can you hear me?" "Yes." "Oh, thank God," came the reply, a woman's voice thick with emotion. "Please help me." "He's going to kill me." "Who's going to kill you?" "Harold Jenkins. He locked me down here." "Please hurry." Caleb straightened up, his jaw set with determination. He glanced around for something to break the lock with and spotted an axe leaning against a woodpile nearby. "Stand back from the doors, madam," he called. "I'm going to break the lock." Taking up the axe, Caleb brought it down on the padlock with all his strength. The first blow dented the metal, the second cracked it, the third sent the lock clattering to the ground in pieces. He pulled open the cellar doors, letting sunlight flood the dark space below. After a moment, his eyes adjusted to the gloom, and he could make out a figure huddled at the bottom of the stairs, a young woman in a torn and dirty dress, her face bruised, her hair matted with dirt and blood. "Can you climb up?" Caleb asked, extending his hand. The woman nodded, her legs shaking as she ascended the stairs. When she reached the top, she swayed unsteadily, and Caleb caught her before she could fall. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I was going to die down there." "What's your name?" Caleb asked, supporting her with an arm around her waist. "Olivia Dawson. I came from Boston to marry Harold Jenkins. I was a mail-order bride." Caleb's expression darkened. "And Jenkins did this to you?" Olivia nodded, wiping at the tears that streaked through the dirt on her face. "I found his ledgers. He's involved in something illegal. When he caught me looking, he beat me and locked me in the cellar. Where is he now? I don't know. I heard him talking with someone earlier about getting rid of a problem. I think he meant me. But then they left." Caleb glanced toward the house, his jaw tight with anger. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Can you ride?" "I think so," Olivia said, though her legs trembled beneath her. "Come on then. My ranch is about an hour's ride from town. You'll be safe there until we can figure out what to do about Jenkins." As they moved toward where Thundercloud was tethered, the front door of the house suddenly banged open, and Harold Jenkins emerged, a shotgun in his hands. His eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with fury when he saw Olivia. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my property?" Jenkins snarled, raising the shotgun. Caleb pushed Olivia behind him, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "The lady isn't property, Jenkins. And from what I can see, you've been mistreating her. This is none of your business, Irwin. That woman is my bride, paid for and delivered. What I do with her is my concern. Not when it involves beating her and locking her in a cellar." Jenkins spat on the ground. "She's a snoop and a thief. Found her going through my private papers." "That's not true," Olivia protested from behind Caleb. "I found ledgers showing he's been dealing in stolen goods, maybe even counterfeiting." Jenkins' face contorted with rage. "Shut your mouth, you lying bitch." He took a step forward, raising the shotgun higher. Caleb's revolver was in his hand before Jenkins could take another step. "Drop the shotgun, Jenkins. I don't want to kill you, but I will if I have to." For a moment, the two men stood facing each other, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, slowly, Jenkins lowered his weapon. "This isn't over, Irwin," he growled. "That woman is mine by contract. The law will back me up." "We'll let the sheriff decide that," Caleb replied coldly. "Now back up into the house and stay there while we leave." Jenkins took a step backward, his eyes never leaving Caleb's face. "You've made an enemy today, Irwin. A bad one." "Wouldn't be the first time," Caleb said, his gun still trained on Jenkins as he guided Olivia toward Thundercloud with his free hand. Once they reached the horse, Caleb helped Olivia mount before swinging up behind her. Jenkins remained on his porch, his shotgun held loosely in his hands, his face a mask of hatred as Caleb turned Thundercloud toward the road. "Hold on tight," Caleb murmured to Olivia as he urged the horse into a trot, putting distance between them and Jenkins as quickly as possible. Olivia clung to the saddle horn, her body tense against Caleb's chest. "He'll come after us," she whispered. "He won't let this go." "Let him try," Caleb replied grimly. "I've dealt with worse than Harold Jenkins." As they rode away from Las Cruces, Olivia felt a curious mixture of terror and relief washing over her. She had escaped the cellar, escaped Jenkins, but for how long? And what would happen to her now? Alone in this harsh territory with no money, no friends, and a man she had known for less than an hour as her only protector. The sun beat down mercilessly as they rode, the landscape a panorama of rugged beauty mesas rising in the distance, sagebrush dotting the plains, the occasional cactus standing sentinel against the vast blue sky. Under different circumstances, Olivia might have found it breathtaking. Now she merely felt overwhelmed. "How far is your ranch?" she asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "About an hour's ride," Caleb replied. "It's not much, just a small house, a barn, and some grazing land for my cattle, but it's peaceful and safe." "Why are you helping me?" Olivia asked, the question that had been nagging at her finally escaping her lips. "You don't know me. I could be exactly what Jenkins said, a thief, a liar." Caleb was quiet for a moment, considering. "I've always believed in judging people by what I see, not what others tell me. And what I saw was a woman locked in a cellar, beaten and afraid. No one deserves that, no matter what they might have done." His simple, straightforward answer brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. After days in the darkness, frightened and alone, his kindness was almost more than she could bear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching on the words. "Don't thank me yet," Caleb said, a hint of wry humor in his voice. "My cooking might make you wish you'd stayed in that cellar." A surprised laugh escaped Olivia, the sound strange to her own ears after so many days of fear and despair. It felt good, that momentary lightness, even though her situation remained precarious. They rode on in companionable silence for a time, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them almost hypnotic. Olivia found herself struggling to stay awake, exhaustion pulling at her like a physical weight. "You can rest if you need to," Caleb said, seeming to sense her fatigue. "I won't let you fall." Tentatively, Olivia leaned back against his solid chest, allowing her eyes to close. Despite the circumstances, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt safer than she had since leaving Boston. When she awoke, the landscape had changed. They were climbing a gentle slope, the terrain more varied, with clusters of pinyon pines and juniper trees providing welcome patches of shade. Ahead, Nestled against the backdrop of low hills stood a modest ranch house with a barn and corral nearby. A small stream wound its way through the property, its banks lined with cottonwood trees. "This is it," Caleb said as Olivia straightened, taking in her surroundings. "Cottonwood Ranch, not much to look at, but it's home." "It's beautiful," Olivia replied sincerely. After the confines of the cellar, the open space and clear air seemed like paradise. As they approached the house, a dog came bounding out to greet them, a large black and white border collie with one blue eye and one brown. It barked excitedly, circling Thundercloud's legs. "That's Patch," Caleb explained, dismounting and then helping Olivia down. "Don't worry, he's friendly, just enthusiastic about visitors. We don't get many out this way." The dog sniffed curiously at Olivia, then gave her hand a tentative lick. Despite everything, she couldn't help smiling as she patted his head. "Come on inside," Caleb said, leading the way to the house. "You look like you could use some food and rest, and maybe a chance to clean up." The interior of the ranch house was simple but comfortable, a main room that served as both kitchen and living area. With a stone fireplace along one wall, a rough-hewn table with 4 chairs, and a pair of well-worn armchairs positioned to catch the warmth of the fire. A short hallway led to what Olivia presumed were bedrooms. "It's not fancy," Caleb said, almost apologetically, "but it's clean." "It's wonderful," Olivia assured him, meaning it. After the filth of the cellar, the neat, orderly space seemed luxurious. Caleb moved to the fireplace, where a pot hung on a hook above the banked coals. "I've got some stew left from yesterday. Let me heat it up for you while you wash up. There's a pump out back with fresh water, and I can bring you some soap and a towel." The promise of being clean again almost brought Olivia to tears. "Thank you. That would be wonderful." While Caleb busied himself with preparations, Olivia took stock of her situation. Her dress was torn and filthy, her hair a tangled mess. She had no possessions beyond the clothes on her back, no money, no prospects. The future stretched before her, uncertain and frightening, but she was alive. She was free. And for now, that would have to be enough. Caleb showed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house. "You can use this room while you're here," he said. "It's not much, but it's private." "Where will you sleep?" Olivia asked, suddenly concerned that she was displacing him. "I've got my own room," he assured her. "This was meant to be a guest room, though you're the first guest I've had in quite a while." He left her with a basin of water, soap, a towel, and a clean shirt and trousers. "They'll be too big," he said, "but they're clean. We can see about getting you some proper clothes from town when things settle down." When Olivia emerged some time later, her face and hands scrubbed clean, her hair combed and braided, wearing Caleb's oversized clothing with the sleeves rolled up and the trousers secured with a piece of rope. She found him at the stove, stirring the pot of stew. He glanced up as she entered, and for a moment his eyes widened slightly. Without the grime and blood, Olivia's natural beauty was evident: high cheekbones, clear blue eyes, and a determined chin that spoke of inner strength despite her ordeal. "You look better," he said, recovering quickly. "How do you feel? Human again," Olivia replied with a small smile. "Thank you for the clothes and the chance to clean up." "Sit down," Caleb said, gesturing to the table. "Food's almost ready." The stew was simple beef, potatoes, carrots, and onions, but to Olivia, who had subsisted on scraps for days, it was the most delicious meal she had ever tasted. She ate slowly, savoring each bite while Caleb watched her with a mixture of concern and approval. "When was the last time you ate properly?" he asked. "Before Jenkins locked me in the cellar," Olivia admitted. "He brought me scraps once a day, but today he didn't come at all." Caleb's expression darkened. "The man deserves worse than a jail cell for what he did to you." "Do you think he'll be arrested?" Olivia asked, setting down her spoon. He seemed so confident that the law would be on his side. "Jenkins has friends in town, but Sheriff Parker is a good man. If your story checks out, especially the part about counterfeiting, which is a federal crime, Jenkins will face justice. And if it doesn't," Olivia couldn't help asking, fear creeping back into her voice. "Then we'll figure something out," Caleb assured her. "I won't let him hurt you again." There was such quiet conviction in his voice that Olivia found herself believing him, despite the short time they had known each other. There was something solid and trustworthy about Caleb Irwin, a steadiness that spoke of a man who kept his word. "Now," Caleb said, changing the subject, "you should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll ride into town and talk to the sheriff. I'll sleep out here tonight so you can have some privacy." "You don't have to do that," Olivia protested. "I don't want to put you out of your bed." "I've slept in worse places," Caleb said with a shrug. "During the war, I once spent a week sleeping in a tree to avoid Confederate patrols. One night on a chair won't kill me." Olivia wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was catching up with her again, making her eyelids heavy. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything." Caleb merely nodded, his expression unreadable. "Get some sleep, Miss Dawson. Tomorrow will be soon enough to worry about what comes next." In the small bedroom, Olivia lay on the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, the occasional lowing of cattle in the distance, the hoot of an owl, the whisper of the wind through the cottonwood trees outside her window. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive, her mind racing with thoughts of Jenkins, of what might happen when they went to town tomorrow, of the uncertain future that lay before her. And beneath it all, the unsettling awareness of the man sleeping just a few yards away, a stranger who had risked his life to save hers, who had brought her into his home without question, who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. A man unlike any she had known before. Finally, lulled by the rhythmic sound of Patches snoring from his position outside her door, the dog had apparently appointed himself her guardian. Olivia drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first peaceful rest she had known since arriving in the New Mexico territory. The morning dawned clear and bright, the early light streaming through the small window beside Olivia's bed. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory rushed back, and with it, a complex tangle of emotions. Relief at her escape, fear of what Jenkins might do, uncertainty about her future, and gratitude toward the man who had saved her. She rose and dressed in the same oversized clothes as the night before, splashing water on her face from the basin Caleb had left for her. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found him already up and about, frying bacon and brewing coffee on the wood stove. "Good morning," he said, glancing up at her approach. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in days," Olivia admitted. "Thank you again for your hospitality." Caleb waved away her thanks. "It's nothing. Sit down, breakfast is almost ready." They ate in companionable silence, the simple meal of bacon, cornbread, and strong black coffee tasting better than any fancy breakfast Olivia had ever had in Boston. When they finished, Caleb outlined his plan for the day. "I need to check on the cattle and make sure everything's secure before we head into town," he explained. "Should take about an hour. Feel free to rest or look around while I'm gone." After he left, Olivia took the opportunity to explore the ranch house more thoroughly. It was a bachelor's home, spare and functional, but clean and well organized. There were few personal touches: a shelf of well-worn books, a guitar propped in the corner, a tin-type photograph of a middle-aged couple that Olivia guessed might be Caleb's parents. On the wall near the fireplace hung a cavalry saber and a faded blue uniform jacket, with sergeant stripes, relics of Caleb's service in the war between the states. Olivia ran her fingers lightly over the jacket, wondering about the experiences that had brought this quiet, self-contained man to this remote ranch in the New Mexico territory. When Caleb returned, his face was grim. "One of my fences has been cut," he said without preamble. "And I found boot prints that don't belong to any of my hands." Olivia felt a chill run through her. "Jenkins? Can't be sure, but the timing is suspicious. I've asked my ranch hand, Miguel, to keep an eye on things while we're gone." For the first time, Olivia noticed the rifle Caleb carried, along with the revolver at his hip. "Do you think he'll try something?" "Better to be prepared," Caleb said, not directly answering her question. "Are you ready to go? It's about an hour's ride to town." The ride to Las Cruces was tense, both of them alert for any sign of trouble. But they encountered no one except a group of vaqueros driving a small herd of cattle, who tipped their hats respectfully to Caleb as they passed. Las Cruces was bustling with activity when they arrived, wagons rolling down the main street, shoppers moving from store to store, children playing in the dusty road while their mothers called warnings to be careful. Olivia felt exposed and vulnerable as they rode through town, expecting at any moment to see Harold Jenkins emerge from one of the buildings. The sheriff's office was a small adobe building near the center of town, with a wooden sign proclaiming "Sheriff" hanging over the door. Inside, they found a tall, lean man with iron gray hair and a weather-beaten face sitting at a desk, sorting through wanted posters. "Caleb," the man said, looking up as they entered. "Wasn't expecting to see you in town again so soon." His gaze shifted to Olivia, curiosity evident in his shrewd blue eyes. "Sheriff Parker," Caleb nodded in greeting. "This is Miss Olivia Dawson. She came west as a mail-order bride for Harold Jenkins." The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly. "I heard Jenkins was expecting a bride from back east." "Didn't realize she'd arrived." "She arrived all right," Caleb said grimly. "And Jenkins locked her in his cellar after beating her. She has quite a story to tell." Parker's expression sobered. "Is that so? Well, Miss Dawson, why don't you have a seat and tell me what happened?" Over the next hour, Olivia recounted everything: her journey from Boston, her arrival in Las Cruces, her discovery of Jenkins' ledgers, the beating, and her imprisonment in the cellar. Throughout her account, Sheriff Parker listened attentively, interrupting only occasionally to ask for clarification on some point. When she finished, the sheriff sat back in his chair, his face troubled. "That's a serious accusation, Miss Dawson, especially the part about counterfeiting. If true, that's a federal crime." "I know what I saw," Olivia said firmly. "I believe you," Parker assured her. "But Jenkins has friends in this town, influential friends. If I'm going to arrest him, I need evidence." "The ledgers were in his desk drawer in the study," Olivia offered. "Unless he's moved them." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "I'll get a warrant to search the premises. In the meantime, where are you staying, Miss Dawson?" "She's staying at my ranch," Caleb said before Olivia could respond. It seemed the safest place given the circumstances. Something flickered in Parker's eyes, concern, perhaps, or disapproval. "That could complicate matters, Caleb. If this goes to trial, her testimony might be questioned if she's been living under your roof." "What was I supposed to do? Leave her on the street?" Caleb's voice had an edge to it now. "Jenkins threatened to kill her." "I'm not criticizing your actions," Parker said, raising a placating hand. "I'm just pointing out a potential legal complication. It might be better if Miss Dawson stayed at the hotel in town, or perhaps with Mrs. Hernandez at the boarding house." "And if Jenkins comes after her?" Caleb challenged. "I'll assign one of my deputies to keep an eye on her," the sheriff promised. "And I'll have a talk with Jenkins. Make it clear that any harm coming to Miss Dawson will be dealt with severely." Olivia, who had been following this exchange with growing unease, finally spoke up. "Don't I have any say in this matter?" Both men turned to look at her, seeming almost surprised at her intervention. "Of course you do," Sheriff Parker said, recovering first. "What would you prefer, Miss Dawson?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I appreciate your concern for legal proprieties, Sheriff, but Mr. Irwin saved my life, and I feel safe at his ranch. If Jenkins is as influential as you suggest, I would not feel secure staying in town, deputy or no deputy." Parker looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "Very well, but I would recommend finding a more suitable arrangement as soon as possible. Perhaps there's a widow or respectable married couple in the area who could offer you lodging." "We'll consider it," Caleb said, his tone making it clear that the discussion was over. "What happens now with Jenkins?" "I'll get that warrant and search his house today," Parker promised. "If we find those ledgers or any evidence of counterfeiting, I'll arrest him immediately. In the meantime, both of you should be careful. Jenkins isn't a man to cross lightly." As they left the sheriff's office, Olivia was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way by the townspeople they passed. News traveled fast in small communities, and her presence, a strange woman in men's clothing, accompanied by Caleb Irwin, was bound to cause talk. "We should get you some proper clothes while we're in town," Caleb said, echoing her thoughts. "Mrs. Wilson's store should have what you need." "I don't have any money," Olivia reminded him, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Consider it a loan," Caleb said easily. "You can pay me back when you're on your feet again." The matter-of-fact way he spoke, without pity or condescension, eased Olivia's discomfort somewhat. Still, as they entered the small dry goods store, she was painfully conscious of her disheveled appearance and borrowed clothes. Mrs. Wilson, a plump, middle-aged woman with kind eyes, took one look at Olivia and immediately went into action, shooing Caleb out of the store with instructions to come back in an hour. Once he was gone, she ushered Olivia behind a screen at the back of the store. "Now, dear, let's see what we can do for you," she said, her voice warm with sympathy. "Caleb Irwin explained a bit of your situation, not everything, I'm sure, but enough for me to understand you've had a rough time of it. Over the next hour, Mrs. Wilson outfitted Olivia with 2 serviceable dresses, a nightgown, undergarments, stockings, and a sturdy pair of boots. She also provided a hairbrush, soap, and other feminine necessities, all the while chatting amiably about local gossip and the latest fashions from back east. When Caleb returned, Olivia was transformed, her hair neatly arranged, wearing a simple but becoming blue calico dress that fit her slender frame perfectly. For a moment, as she emerged from behind the screen, Caleb stared at her, something like admiration flickering in his eyes before he quickly schooled his expression. "You look very nice, Miss Dawson," he said, his voice slightly gruff. "Thank you, Mr. Irwin," Olivia replied formally, aware of Mrs. Wilson's interested gaze moving between them. After Caleb paid for the purchases, ignoring Olivia's whispered protests about the expense, they stepped back onto the boardwalk, the packages containing Olivia's new belongings tucked under his arm. "We should head back to the ranch," Caleb said, glancing up at the position of the sun. "I don't like leaving Miguel alone too long, especially with that cut fence." "What about waiting to hear from Sheriff Parker about Jenkins?" Olivia asked. "Parker knows where to find us if he needs to," Caleb said, "and I'd rather not linger in town longer than necessary. Jenkins has too many eyes and ears here." As they mounted Thundercloud for the ride back to Cottonwood Ranch, Olivia, now sitting side saddle in her new dress, she couldn't help scanning the street anxiously, half expecting to see Harold Jenkins lurking in some doorway. But there was no sign of him, and soon they were leaving Las Cruces behind, the dusty trail stretching before them toward the distant hills. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Olivia found herself increasingly aware of Caleb's solid presence behind her, the steady rise and fall of his chest against her back as he breathed, the careful way he held the reins to avoid crowding her, the faint scent of leather and soap that clung to him. She had known the man for barely 24 hours, yet already she felt a connection to him that was as surprising as it was undeniable. Perhaps it was simply gratitude for his rescue, or the natural bond that formed between people who faced danger together. Whatever it was, Olivia found it both comforting and unsettling. When they reached Cottonwood Ranch, Miguel was waiting for them, his dark face creased with worry. He spoke rapidly to Caleb in Spanish, gesturing toward the western pasture. Caleb's expression grew grim as he listened. "Stay here with Miguel," he instructed Olivia as he dismounted. "I need to check something." "What is it?" Olivia asked, alarmed by the tension in his voice. "Probably nothing," Caleb said, but his hand moved to the rifle still secured to his saddle. "Just stay close to the house until I get back." As Caleb rode off toward the distant pasture, Miguel helped Olivia down from the horse. He was a slight, wiry man in his 50s, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of a lifetime spent outdoors. "Señor Caleb, he is a good man," Miguel said in accented but clear English as they walked toward the house. "He will make sure you are safe." "What did you tell him just now?" Olivia asked. "Something about the western pasture." Miguel's expression grew somber. "I saw smoke there earlier, and 3 riders heading away toward town. I did not recognize them." A chill ran through Olivia. "You think they set a fire?" "Possible," Miguel acknowledged. "The grass is very dry. Fire would spread quickly." Olivia gazed in the direction Caleb had ridden, worry gnawing at her. "Should we go after him?" Miguel shook his head firmly. "Señor Caleb said to stay here. We stay. He knows what he is doing." Inside the house, Olivia paced restlessly while Miguel busied himself preparing coffee. The minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Outside, the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the light taking on the golden quality of early evening. Just as Olivia was about to insist they go looking for Caleb, regardless of his instructions, the sound of hoofbeats announced his return. She rushed to the door, relief washing over her at the sight of him riding toward the house. But as he drew closer, Olivia could see that his face was blackened with soot, his clothes singed in places. He dismounted stiffly, and she noticed he was favoring his right arm. "What happened?" she asked, hurrying to meet him. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious," Caleb said, though his voice was rough with exhaustion. "Someone set fire to the grass in the western pasture. I managed to get it under control before it spread too far, but I burned my arm a bit." "Let me see," Olivia insisted, taking his right arm gently. The sleeve of his shirt was scorched away in one spot, revealing an angry red burn about the size of her palm on his forearm. Olivia sucked in a sympathetic breath. "This needs to be treated right away. Do you have any salve or bandages?" "In the kitchen cabinet," Caleb said, allowing her to lead him into the house. "But it's not that bad. Sit down and let me take care of it," Olivia said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. "Miguel, could you bring some cool water, please?" As Miguel hurried to comply, Olivia found the tin of salve and clean cloths where Caleb had indicated. She worked quickly but gently, cleaning the burn with cool water, applying the salve, and wrapping his arm with a clean bandage. Throughout her ministrations, Caleb watched her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret: surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. When she finished, he flexed his arm experimentally. "Thank you, that feels better." "You're welcome." Now, what happened out there? Was it Jenkins? Caleb's jaw tightened. I can't be certain, but the timing is suspicious. 3 riders, Miguel said. Jenkins and 2 others, most likely. But why target your ranch? Olivia asked, distress evident in her voice. His quarrel is with me, not you. His quarrel is with both of us now, Caleb pointed out. I interfered with his plans for you. Men like Jenkins don't forgive that kind of thing easily. I'm so sorry, Olivia said, guilt washing over her. I've brought nothing but trouble to your door. This isn't your fault, Caleb said firmly. Jenkins is the one responsible for his actions, not you. Before Olivia could respond, they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Caleb moved to the window, his hand dropping to his revolver. After a moment, his posture relaxed slightly. It's Sheriff Parker. The sheriff's expression was grave as he stepped into the house a few minutes later. Thought I might find you two here, he said, removing his hat. I've got news and you're not going to like it. Jenkins got away, Caleb guessed, his voice tight. Parker nodded grimly. By the time I got that search warrant and went to his house, he was gone. Took whatever was in that desk with him. My deputy spotted him and 2 other men riding out of town hard a few hours ago. Headed this way initially, though they could have changed course. They came here, Caleb confirmed. Set fire to my western pasture. We got lucky the wind was blowing away from the house, and I managed to get it under control before it spread too far. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. Arson. That's a serious charge to add to the list. You're sure it was Jenkins? Reasonably sure, Caleb said. Miguel saw 3 riders leaving the scene. Parker sighed heavily. I've sent telegrams to the other sheriffs in the territory with descriptions of Jenkins and his known associates. If they try to leave New Mexico, they might be caught. But for now. He trailed off, his implication clear. For now, we need to be on our guard, Caleb finished for him. Jenkins might try again, especially if he thinks Miss Dawson can testify against him. The sheriff nodded, his gaze shifting to Olivia. Which brings me to another piece of news. I found a letter at Jenkins' house. It looks like he'd started writing to the marriage broker who arranged your match, Miss Dawson. He was demanding his money back, claiming you weren't as advertised. Olivia felt a flare of indignation. Not as advertised. He's the one who lied about his circumstances. I'm just telling you what I found, Parker said, raising a placating hand. The point is, according to this letter, he paid quite a sum to bring you out here. $500. $500, Olivia repeated, shocked. That was a small fortune in 1872. Which means he's lost not only his illegal business but also a significant investment, Caleb said grimly. He has every reason to want revenge. Sheriff Parker's expression was solemn. I'm afraid so. I'd advise both of you to be extremely careful until Jenkins is apprehended. Don't go anywhere alone and keep your weapons handy. After the sheriff left, promising to send a deputy out to the ranch the next day to check on them, Olivia felt a crushing weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This is all my fault, she said again, sinking into a chair at the table. If I hadn't been so curious about those ledgers. You found evidence of criminal activity, Caleb pointed out, sitting across from her. That's not something to apologize for. But now your life is in danger because of me, Olivia persisted. Your ranch has been damaged. I should leave, find somewhere else to go, and go where? Caleb interrupted. You have no money, no family here. Jenkins would find you eventually, and there would be no one to protect you. I can't keep imposing on your kindness, Olivia said, though the prospect of leaving the relative safety of Cottonwood Ranch filled her with dread. It's not an imposition, Caleb said firmly. You're welcome here for as long as you need to stay. We'll get through this together. There was such quiet conviction in his voice that Olivia found herself believing him, despite the fear that gnawed at her. "Thank you," she said simply. Miguel prepared a simple supper of beans, tortillas, and coffee. As they ate, Caleb outlined his plan for securing the ranch against possible attack. "Miguel will sleep in the bunkhouse tonight. Keep an eye on the approach from the east. I'll take the first watch here at the house, then wake him for the second shift." "What about me?" Olivia asked. "I want to help." Caleb looked like he wanted to refuse but thought better of it. "Can you handle a firearm?" "My father taught me to shoot a rifle when I was 14, Olivia said. "He believed every woman should know how to defend herself." "Smart man," Caleb commented. "There's a Winchester in the cabinet by the door. If you hear anything suspicious during the night, anything at all, wake me immediately." That night, Olivia lay awake in the small bedroom, the Winchester rifle propped against the wall beside her bed. Outside, the wind had risen, carrying with it the scent of smoke from the distant pasture fire. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind through the cottonwood trees, set her nerves on edge. Her thoughts circled restlessly, moving from fear of Jenkins to concern for Caleb to uncertainty about her future. What would happen after Jenkins was caught? She had no money to return to Boston, even if she wanted to, which she didn't. There was nothing for her there but debts and memories of her parents. But what future could she have here in the New Mexico territory? She had come west to be a wife, but that plan had crumbled the moment Harold Jenkins had shown his true nature. She had no skills that would be valuable in this rough frontier land, no connections, no prospects, except, perhaps, for the quiet rancher who had risked his life to save hers. The thought brought a flush to Olivia's cheeks. Caleb Irwin was unlike any man she had known in Boston, straightforward, capable, without pretense or artifice. There was a gravity to him, a steadiness that spoke of a man who had seen the worst the world had to offer and had not been broken by it. She barely knew him, she reminded herself firmly. It was foolish to romanticize him simply because he had rescued her. Yet she couldn't deny the way her heart quickened when he looked at her, or the sense of safety she felt in his presence. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and Olivia drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with flames and shadowy figures pursuing her through endless darkness. She woke to the sound of Patch barking short, sharp barks that carried a note of alarm. Instantly alert, Olivia reached for the Winchester, her heart pounding. Outside, the darkness was absolute, the moon having set hours ago. She heard a soft knock at her door, then Caleb's voice, barely above a whisper. "Olivia, are you awake?" "Yes," she replied, already on her feet, the rifle in her hands. "Stay in your room," he instructed. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Miguel." Before she could respond, she heard his footsteps moving away, the front door of the house opening and closing quietly. Olivia stood in the darkness of her room, torn between fear and frustration at being told to stay behind. Making her decision, she moved to the window, careful to stay to one side where she couldn't be seen from outside. In the faint starlight, she could make out shadowy figures moving near the barn, 3 or 4 men. It was hard to tell. Patch continued to bark from somewhere near the corral, his voice now joined by the nervous whinnies of the horses. There was a sudden flare of light near the barn, a match being struck, and then a whoosh as something caught fire. Flames leaped upward, illuminating the scene in flickering orange light. Olivia could see Caleb now, running toward the barn, his revolver drawn. One of the shadowy figures spotted him and raised what looked like a rifle. Without thinking, Olivia threw open the window and fired the Winchester, the shot deafeningly loud in the quiet night. The figure staggered, dropping his weapon. Chaos erupted. The intruders scattered, returning fire wildly. Olivia ducked below the windowsill as a bullet splintered the wooden frame inches from her head. She heard Caleb shouting, then more gunshots, 3, 4, 5 in rapid succession. Then silence, broken only by the crackle of flames from the barn. Olivia risked a glance out the window again. The yard was empty now, except for Caleb, who was working frantically to put out the fire. She could see no sign of the intruders. Ignoring Caleb's instructions to stay put, Olivia rushed from the room, pausing only to grab a bucket from the kitchen before running outside to help fight the fire. Miguel was already there, passing buckets of water from the well to Caleb. For the next hour, they worked together in desperate silence, fighting to save the barn and the frightened horses inside. The fire had been set at the door, but thanks to their quick response, it hadn't spread far into the structure. By the time the flames were completely extinguished, dawn was breaking, the eastern sky lightening to a pale gray. All three of them were exhausted, covered in soot and sweat, but the barn, though scorched and damaged, was still standing and the horses were unharmed. "You were supposed to stay inside," Caleb said to Olivia as they slumped to the ground near the well, too tired to move further. "You're welcome," Olivia replied, a hint of defiance in her voice. "That shot I fired might have saved your life." For a moment, Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but then his expression softened into something like grudging respect. "It was a good shot," he admitted. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father was an avid hunter," Olivia explained. "He had no sons, so he taught me instead. Said I had a better eye than most men he knew." A ghost of a smile touched Caleb's lips. He wasn't wrong. Miguel, who had been examining the ground near where the intruders had been standing, called out something in Spanish. Caleb immediately got to his feet and went to join him. When he returned, his expression was grim. "There's a blood trail leading away from the ranch. You hit one of them, Olivia." "Jenkins?" she asked, a mixture of hope and dread in her voice. "Can't tell," Caleb said, "but whoever it was lost enough blood that they won't get far without treatment." "Should we go after them?" Olivia asked, though the thought filled her with fear. Caleb shook his head. "Too risky. They might be waiting to ambush anyone who follows. We'll ride into town as soon as it's fully light, report what happened to Sheriff Parker. He can organize a proper search party." Back inside the house, they washed away the worst of the soot and smoke, then prepared a hasty breakfast of coffee and cold biscuits left from the previous day. None of them had much appetite, but they needed the sustenance for the ride into town. "I want you to stay here today, Miguel," Caleb said as they prepared to leave. "Keep an eye on things. If Jenkins or his men come back, don't try to be a hero, just ride for town as fast as you can." Miguel nodded, his dark eyes serious. "Be careful, Señor Caleb. Those men, they are desperate now." The ride to Las Cruces seemed longer than before, both Olivia and Caleb alert for any sign of ambush along the way. But they encountered no one, and the town was just stirring to life when they arrived. Shopkeepers opening their doors, women drawing water from the communal well in the town square. Sheriff Parker was already at his office, his face drawn with lack of sleep. He listened intently as Caleb and Olivia described the night's events, his expression growing increasingly grave. "Jenkins is escalating," he said when they finished. "First cutting fences, then setting grass fires, now a direct attack on your home. He's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." "Which is what?" Olivia asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Revenge," Parker said simply, "on both of you. You, Miss Dawson, for discovering his illegal operations, and you, Caleb, for interfering and costing him his investment." "What do we do now?" Caleb asked. The sheriff sighed heavily. "I'll organize a search party to follow that blood trail. If we're lucky, the wounded man will lead us straight to Jenkins. In the meantime—" He hesitated, seeming to weigh his words carefully. In the meantime, I think you should both leave the area for a while." "Leave?" Caleb repeated, disbelief in his voice. "This is my home, Sheriff. Everything I have is here." "I know," Parker acknowledged. "But Jenkins has shown he's willing to destroy your property to get to you. Next time he might burn down your house with both of you inside. At least until we catch him, you'd be safer elsewhere." "Where would we go?" Olivia asked, the wee slipping out before she could think better of it. She glanced at Caleb, wondering if he would object to her presumption, but he seemed too preoccupied with the sheriff's suggestion to notice. "My brother has a ranch near Santa Fe," Parker offered. "He could use an experienced hand for a few weeks, and it would be a safe place for Miss Dawson as well. My sister-in-law is there, so there would be no cause for gossip." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "I don't like it, but you're right. It's not safe for Olivia at my ranch right now." "For either of you," Parker corrected him. "Jenkins seems just as determined to harm you as Miss Dawson." "What about my cattle, my horses?" Caleb asked, practical concerns asserting themselves. "Miguel can look after them, with some help from my deputies," Parker said. "I'll make sure someone checks on the ranch every day." It was decided. They would leave for Santa Fe the next morning, traveling with a freight wagon bound for the territorial capital. The driver, a burly man named Johnson whom Parker vouched for, would provide an extra layer of protection during the 3-day journey. As they left the sheriff's office, Olivia could sense the tension in Caleb's rigid posture. "I'm sorry," she said quietly as they walked toward the general store to purchase supplies for the journey. "I never meant to uproot your life like this." Caleb sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "It's not your fault," he said, repeating what he had told her before, "and it's just temporary. Once Jenkins is caught, we'll return to Cottonwood Ranch and put all this behind us." The "we" in his statement didn't escape Olivia's notice, nor did the assumption that she would return with him to the ranch. The thought both warmed and unsettled her. What place could she have in Caleb Irwin's life once the danger had passed? She was still, in the eyes of the law and society, a mail-order bride contracted to Harold Jenkins, a complication neither of them had addressed. The rest of the day was spent in preparations for their departure. Caleb purchased ammunition, food supplies, and other necessities, while Olivia, with money borrowed from him, bought a few additional items of clothing and personal necessities. They returned to Cottonwood Ranch late in the afternoon to pack their belongings and secure the house as best they could against potential intruders. Miguel would stay in the bunkhouse, keeping an eye on the property, but his primary responsibility would be the cattle and horses. As night fell, a strained atmosphere settled over the ranch house. Both Caleb and Olivia were on edge, expecting another attack at any moment. They ate a simple supper in near silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "You should try to get some sleep," Caleb said finally as they finished washing the dishes. "We need to be on the road early tomorrow." "What about you?" Olivia asked, noting the fatigue evident in the lines around his eyes. "I'll take the first watch again," he said. "Miguel will relieve me at midnight." Olivia wanted to protest, but saw the determination in his face and knew it would be useless. Instead, she simply nodded. "Wake me if you need me," she said, then impulsively added, "And thank you, Caleb, for everything." It was the first time she had used his given name, and something flickered in his eyes at the sound of it, surprise, perhaps, or something warmer. "Get some rest, Olivia," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." In her small bedroom, Olivia packed the few belongings she had acquired since her rescue into a carpet bag borrowed from Caleb. It was a pitiful collection: 2 dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, and the few toiletries Mrs. Wilson had provided. Everything she owned in the world could fit into one small bag. The thought would have been depressing if not for the strange sense of liberation that accompanied it. She had come west with a trunk full of possessions and expectations, only to find herself imprisoned and abused. Now, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a handful of borrowed items, she felt freer than she had in years. Part of that freedom, she knew, was due to the man keeping watch in the other room, a man who had risked everything to save a woman he didn't know, who had opened his home to her without hesitation, who had stood beside her against danger without question. Whatever happened in the days to come, Olivia knew her life had been irrevocably changed by meeting Caleb Irwin. With that thought warming her heart despite the uncertainty of their situation, Olivia finally drifted into sleep, the Winchester once again propped against the wall beside her bed. The night passed without incident, and they were on the road to Las Cruces before dawn, Caleb riding Thundercloud and Olivia on a gentle mare named Daisy that he had insisted she take with them. Miguel stood in the yard as they departed, his face solemn as he raised a hand in farewell. In town, they met Johnson and his freight wagon as arranged. The driver was a taciturn man with a grizzled beard and weather-beaten face, but his eyes were kind as he helped Olivia up onto the wagon seat. "Sheriff Parker told me about your trouble," he said as they prepared to leave. "Don't you worry, madam. Nobody's going to bother you while you're with old Johnson." The journey to Santa Fe was long and arduous, the wagon moving at a plodding pace along the rutted trail that served as the main road between the two settlements. Caleb rode alongside, constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit, his rifle always within easy reach. They camped at night in carefully chosen locations with good visibility, taking turns standing watch. Johnson proved to be a surprisingly good cook, preparing tasty meals over the campfire each evening. As they ate, he entertained them with stories of his 30 years as a freight driver in the territory, from encounters with hostile Apaches to narrow escapes from flash floods in normally dry arroyos. On the third day, they caught their first glimpse of Santa Fe in the distance, a cluster of adobe buildings nestled against the backdrop of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The territorial capital was larger than Las Cruces, with a distinctly Spanish flavor to its architecture and culture. Sheriff Parker's brother, Thomas, met them at the edge of town, having been notified of their arrival by telegraph. He was a tall, lean man with the same shrewd blue eyes as his brother, though his hair was still more brown than gray. "Welcome to Santa Fe," he said, shaking Caleb's hand firmly before turning to Olivia with a courteous bow. "Miss Dawson, my wife Martha has prepared the guest room for you. She's looking forward to having another woman around the place." The Parker Ranch was smaller than Cottonwood Ranch but better established, with a solid adobe house, a large barn, and well-maintained corrals for the horses. Martha Parker, a cheerful woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes, greeted them warmly at the door. "You poor dears," she said, ushering them inside. "What a terrible ordeal you've been through. Well, you're safe here now. Come in, I've got supper nearly ready, and I'm sure you're famished after your journey." The next few days passed in a blur of adjustment to their new surroundings. Thomas Parker put Caleb to work immediately, appreciating the younger man's experience with cattle. Olivia, meanwhile, found herself welcomed into Martha's domain, the household and garden, where an extra pair of hands was always useful. For Olivia, who had grown up in a city and had little experience with the practical aspects of frontier life, Martha proved to be a patient and knowledgeable teacher. Under her guidance, Olivia learned to make soap from tallow and lye, to bake bread in the outdoor Horno oven, to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter months. "You're a quick study," Martha remarked one afternoon as they worked together in the vegetable garden, harvesting late summer squash and beans. Most city girls would turn up their noses at getting their hands dirty like this. "I've never been afraid of hard work," Olivia replied, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "And I need to learn these skills if I'm going to survive out here." Martha gave her a shrewd look. "Planning to stay in the territory, are you? Even after all that's happened?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think so. There's nothing for me back east, and despite everything—" She glanced toward the distant pasture where Caleb was working with Thomas and the ranch hands. "There are things I've come to value here." A knowing smile touched Martha's lips. "Caleb Irwin is a good man," she said quietly. "One of the best Thomas and I have known. He's had his share of hardships, but they haven't soured him on life." "What kind of hardships?" Olivia asked, curiosity overcoming her usual reticence. Martha seemed to weigh how much to share. "It's not my story to tell," she said finally. "But I will say that Caleb has known loss, deep loss. It's made him cautious with his heart. Patient, though. If you've caught his interest, he'll take his time." Before Olivia could respond to deny that she had caught Caleb's interest, or to ask for more details about his past, Thomas appeared at the garden gate, calling for Martha. "Telegraph from Las Cruces," he announced, his expression grave. "There's news about Jenkins." Caleb appeared behind Thomas, his face tense with anticipation. Olivia stood quickly, brushing dirt from her skirts as she moved to join them. "What is it?" she asked, anxiety tightening her chest. "Have they caught him?" Thomas looked at Caleb, then back to Olivia. "No, I'm afraid not. According to my brother, Jenkins and his men attacked your ranch again 2 nights ago. Miguel was injured trying to protect the property." "How badly?" Caleb asked, his voice tight with concern. "Not life-threatening, but he took a bullet in the shoulder." "He's recovering at Doc Wilson's place in Las Cruces." "And the ranch?" Caleb's face was carefully expressionless, but Olivia could see the tension in his jaw. Thomas hesitated. "I'm sorry, Caleb. They burned the house to the ground." For a moment, no one spoke. Olivia felt as if the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. Caleb's home destroyed because of her presence there. The guilt was crushing. "The barn?" Caleb asked finally. "The livestock barn still standing," Thomas said, "and most of the cattle are accounted for. Some ran off during the attack, but my brother has men out looking for them." Caleb nodded once, his expression still carefully controlled. "I should go back," he said. "Rebuild. Miguel can't manage alone, especially not injured." "You can't go back yet," Thomas said firmly. "Jenkins is still out there, and now he's shown he's willing to commit arson and attempted murder. My brother will handle things in Las Cruces for now." "It's my ranch," Caleb said, a hint of stubbornness entering his voice. "And it will still be your ranch after Jenkins is caught," Thomas replied reasonably. "In the meantime, you're needed here. I've got more cattle than hands to manage them, and with winter coming on." Olivia watched the exchange with a growing sense of despair. Everything Caleb had worked for was being destroyed because of her. Because she had stumbled upon Jenkins' illegal activities, because Caleb had rescued her from that cellar. "This is all my fault," she said aloud, unable to contain the guilt any longer. "If I hadn't—" "No," Caleb interrupted, his voice unexpectedly gentle as he turned to her. "This is Jenkins' doing, not yours. You're not responsible for his crimes." "But your home is just a building," Caleb finished for her. "It can be rebuilt. What matters is that you're safe, that Miguel will recover, that we're all alive to fight another day." There was such quiet certainty in his voice that Olivia found herself believing him, despite the evidence of her own guilt. She nodded slowly, blinking back tears. "I still think I should go back," Caleb said, turning to Thomas again. At least to check on things, to see Miguel. Thomas shook his head firmly. Not yet. Give it a little more time. My brother has deputies patrolling the area looking for Jenkins. When they catch him, then you can go back and rebuild. That evening, after supper, Olivia found Caleb sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the distant mountains now silhouetted against the darkening sky. She hesitated, then sat beside him on the rough-hewn bench. "I'm so sorry about your house," she said softly. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I built that house myself," he said finally. "Took me the better part of a year. Every nail, every board, every shingle. I put it all together with my own hands." The pain in his voice was evident, despite his earlier dismissal of the house as just a building. Olivia's heart ached for him. "You'll rebuild it," she said with conviction. "Even better than before." Caleb glanced at her, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Yes, I will." He was quiet for another moment, then added, "When I came west after the war, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a few dollars in my pocket. Built everything from scratch. I can do it again if I have to." "You won't be alone this time," Olivia said impulsively, then felt heat rising in her cheeks as she realized the implication of her words. Caleb turned to look at her fully now, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. "No," he said slowly, "I won't be alone." The silence that fell between them was charged with unspoken possibilities. Olivia was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of leather and horsehair that clung to him, the steady rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. "Olivia," he began, his voice low and serious. He was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats, a rider coming fast toward the ranch house. In an instant, Caleb was on his feet, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Thomas appeared in the doorway, a rifle in his hands. "Stay inside," Caleb instructed Olivia, his voice tense. "But please," he said, his eyes meeting hers briefly, "just until we know who it is." Reluctantly, Olivia retreated to the doorway where Martha stood, her face tight with concern. Together, they watched as Thomas and Caleb moved to the edge of the porch, weapons ready. The rider came into view, a young man on a lathered horse, riding hard. As he approached the house, he called out, "Mr. Parker, message from the sheriff in Las Cruces." Thomas lowered his rifle slightly. "That's Billy Matthews, works for the telegraph office in town," he said to Caleb. "Let's hear what he has to say." The news Billy brought was electrifying. Harold Jenkins had been captured. A traveler had recognized him from the wanted posters in a small settlement near the Arizona border and had alerted the local law enforcement. Jenkins had been wounded, shot in the leg, presumably by Olivia during the attack on Cottonwood Ranch, and had been unable to travel far. His two companions had abandoned him, apparently unwilling to risk capture for his sake. "Sheriff Parker is bringing him back to Las Cruces for trial," Billy reported. "Should be there by now." He sent a telegram asking for Mr. Irwin and Miss Dawson to return as soon as possible to give their testimony. Relief swept through Olivia like a physical force, leaving her light-headed. Jenkins was captured. The nightmare was over. Beside her, Martha gave a satisfied nod. "Good. It's about time that scoundrel faced justice for what he's done." The next morning dawned clear and cool, the first hint of autumn in the air as they prepared for the journey back to Las Cruces. Thomas arranged for them to travel with a freight wagon again, the same Johnson who had brought them to Santa Fe. "Take care of yourselves," Martha said as she embraced Olivia before their departure. "And remember what I told you about being patient. Some things are worth waiting for." The return journey seemed faster than the outward one, perhaps because the weight of fear had been lifted from their shoulders. Caleb rode beside the wagon as before, but his posture was more relaxed, his gaze no longer constantly scanning the horizon for threats. They talked more freely during this journey, sharing stories of their respective pasts. Caleb spoke of his childhood in Missouri, his service in the Union Army during the war, his decision to come west afterward in search of a fresh start. Olivia told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a professor at Harvard who had lost everything in a bank failure just before his death, leaving Olivia alone and nearly destitute. "Is that why you agreed to be a mail-order bride?" Caleb asked during their second night on the trail as they sat by the campfire after Johnson had retired to his bedroll. "Because of the financial difficulties," Olivia nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "Partly, but it was more than that. After my parents died, there was emptiness. Boston held nothing for me anymore. When I saw Jenkins' advertisement in the newspaper, all those flowery promises about a new life in the West, it seemed like an answer to my prayers." "Despite how it turned out with Jenkins," Caleb said carefully, "do you regret coming west?" Olivia considered the question, gazing into the dancing flames of the campfire. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. If I hadn't come west, I wouldn't have." She hesitated, then finished softly, "I wouldn't have met you." In the flickering light of the fire, she saw something warm and intense in Caleb's eyes as they met hers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them filled with unspoken emotions. "Olivia," Caleb began, his voice low and serious, "when all this is over, when Jenkins is sentenced and you're free of any legal entanglements, I want to ask you something. But not yet. Not until everything is settled." Her heart quickened at his words, hope and uncertainty mingling in her chest. "What do you want to ask me?" Caleb smiled slightly, shaking his head. "When the time is right," he promised. "Not before." Their arrival in Las Cruces 3 days later caused something of a sensation. Word had spread about Jenkins' capture and the circumstances surrounding it, and it seemed the whole town turned out to watch as they rode in. Sheriff Parker met them at his office, his face showing relief at their safe return. "Good to see you both," he said, shaking Caleb's hand and nodding respectfully to Olivia. "Jenkins is locked up tight, along with one of his associates who we caught trying to flee to Mexico. The third man is still at large, but he's the least of the 3 just hired muscle, from what we can tell." "What charges is Jenkins facing?" Caleb asked. "Counterfeiting, for starters," Parker replied grimly. "We found the plates and press at a hideout north of town, based on information Jenkins provided after his capture. He's also charged with assault, kidnapping, arson, and attempted murder. He'll hang for sure." The reality of it, that Jenkins would likely face execution for his crimes, sent a chill through Olivia despite the warm day. She had never wished for anyone's death, not even her captors. "When is the trial?" she asked quietly. "Circuit judge arrives next week," Parker said. "Trial shouldn't take long with the evidence we have. In the meantime, I've arranged for you to stay at Mrs. Hernandez's boarding house, Miss Dawson. It's respectable, and you'll be comfortable there until this is all sorted out." Caleb nodded his approval of the arrangement. "And I'll be staying at Miguel's place while I rebuild the ranch house," he said. "How is he recovering?" "Well enough," Parker reported. "Doc Wilson says the bullet wound is healing cleanly. He'll have limited use of that arm for a while, but no permanent damage." Over the next week, Olivia settled into a routine at the boarding house. Mrs. Hernandez was a kind, motherly woman who took Olivia under her wing, introducing her to other residents and including her in the household activities. Caleb visited every day, bringing news of his progress on rebuilding the ranch house. He had hired several men from town to help with the construction, and the work was proceeding quickly. "The frame is already up," he reported one afternoon as they sat in Mrs. Hernandez's small parlor, the older woman discreetly busy with her knitting in the corner to provide a proper chaperone. "If the weather holds, we might have the roof on within a week." "That's wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "Will it be the same as before?" "Similar, but better," Caleb replied, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I'm adding a proper kitchen with a pump inside for water, and a second fireplace in the main bedroom for warmth in winter." The judge arrived as scheduled, and the trial of Harold Jenkins began the following day. Olivia's testimony about her imprisonment in the cellar and the ledgers she had discovered clearly moved the jury, while Caleb's account of the attacks on his ranch provided further evidence of Jenkins' violent nature. Jenkins himself appeared diminished in the courtroom, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by sullen resignation, as the evidence mounted against him. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts after less than an hour of deliberation, he showed no surprise, merely a flicker of fear as the judge pronounced the sentence: death by hanging, to be carried out within 30 days. As they left the courthouse, Olivia felt strangely empty. The verdict had been expected, the sentence just given the magnitude of Jenkins' crimes. Yet there was no sense of triumph or even relief, only a weary gratitude that this chapter of her life was coming to an end. "Are you all right?" Caleb asked as they walked slowly back toward the boarding house. "Yes," Olivia said, then amended, "No, I don't know, I thought I would feel different when it was over." Caleb nodded, understanding. "Justice doesn't always bring the closure we expect," he said quietly, "but it does mean you're free now. Your contract with Jenkins is null and void due to his crimes. You can make your own choices about what comes next." His words reminded her of the promise he had made during their journey from Santa Fe, that when everything was settled, he wanted to ask her something. Her heart quickened at the memory. "What comes next for you?" she asked, glancing sideways at him. "Finishing the house," Caleb said simply. "Getting my cattle back in order before winter. And—" he hesitated, then stopped walking, turning to face her. "And asking you that question I mentioned before." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "You said you would ask when everything was settled." "It is settled," Caleb said, his voice low and serious. "Jenkins has been found guilty. Your legal ties to him are severed. You're free to make your own choices now." Around them, the street bustled with the usual afternoon activity, shoppers moving from store to store, wagons rolling past, children playing in the dusty road. But for Olivia, the world had narrowed to this moment, this man standing before her with intensity in his gray eyes. "What did you want to ask me?" she said, hardly recognizing her own voice. Caleb took a deep breath. "I know we haven't known each other long," he began. "And I know your experience with Jenkins might make you wary of any such arrangement. But I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than I thought possible in such a short time." He reached for her hand, holding it gently in his own. "When the house is finished, when everything is ready, would you consider coming back to Cottonwood Ranch? Not as a guest this time, but as my wife." Though she had suspected what he might ask, the actual words still took her breath away. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice catching on his name. "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden. I know you might need time to consider, and if your answer is no, I'll understand. But I wanted you to know that the option is there if you want it." Olivia looked up into his face, this man who had saved her from darkness, who had protected her without question, who had lost his home because of her yet never once blamed her for it. In his eyes, she saw not the possessive desire that had lurked in Jenkins' gaze, but something warmer, more patient. Respect, affection, perhaps even love. "I don't need time to consider," she said, her voice steadier now. My answer is yes, Caleb. I would be honored to be your wife. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds, transforming his usually serious expression into one of such joy that Olivia's heart seemed to skip a beat. Without regard for the curious glances of passers-by, Caleb pulled her into an embrace, holding her as if she were something precious and fragile. "I'll make you happy," he promised against her hair. "I swear it." "You already have," Olivia whispered back, meaning every word. 2 months later, on a crisp December morning with the distant mountains dusted with snow, Olivia Dawson became Olivia Irwin in a simple ceremony at the small church in Las Cruces. Martha and Thomas Parker had made the journey from Santa Fe to attend, along with Sheriff Parker. Miguel, his arm still in a sling but otherwise recovered, and a handful of neighbors and friends. The new house at Cottonwood Ranch was finished sturdier and more comfortable than the original, with the promised indoor pump in the kitchen and fireplaces in both the main room and the bedroom. Caleb had worked tirelessly to have it ready for their return as husband and wife. As they rode away from the church, Olivia beside Caleb on Daisy, now her horse by right, a wedding gift from her new husband, she couldn't help reflecting on the strange, twisted path that had brought her to this moment. She had come west as a mail-order bride, seeking security and a fresh start. Instead, she had found imprisonment, terror, and the threat of death. But she had also found courage she didn't know she possessed, skills she had never had the opportunity to develop, and most importantly, a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances when a desperate woman locked in a cellar had cried out, and a good man had heard her and broken down the door. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked as they rode side by side, Cottonwood Ranch visible in the distance. Olivia smiled, reaching across the space between them to take his hand. "I'm thinking that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures," she said. "And that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Caleb's fingers tightened around hers, his eyes warm with love. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irwin," he said softly. "Welcome home." 5 years later, Cottonwood Ranch had prospered beyond anything Caleb or Olivia could have imagined on that winter day when they returned as husband and wife. The cattle herd had grown, the pastures had been expanded, and the ranch house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family, first with the arrival of their son, James, now 3 years old, and then their twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, just celebrating their first birthday. Miguel remained with them, now promoted to foreman, overseeing the additional hands they had hired as the ranch operations expanded. Mrs. Hernandez had joined their household as well, ostensibly as a housekeeper, but in reality more like a beloved grandmother to the children. On a warm evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching James play with Patch, now elderly but still devoted to his family, Olivia leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder with a contented sigh. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If you hadn't ridden past Jenkins' house that day, if you hadn't heard my cries." Caleb's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I prefer to think about how things did turn out, about what we've built together." Olivia smiled, closing her eyes and breathing in the scent of home leather and horses, the flowers she had planted along the path to the house, the bread baking in the kitchen, the unique smell of her husband, still as comforting to her as it had been on that first desperate ride away from Las Cruces. "I love you, Caleb Irwin," she said softly, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "And I love you, Olivia Irwin," he replied, his voice warm with emotion, "more with each passing day." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia thought of all they had overcome, all they had built, all they had to look forward to in the years ahead. The darkness of that cellar seemed like a distant nightmare now, fading with each day spent in the light of love and family. She had come west, seeking a new beginning. Despite all the trials and terrors along the way, that was exactly what she had found, a beginning that continued to unfold, day by day. In this home they had built together on the frontier of a new world.